Black Clover, written and illustrated by Yuki Tabata, is one of the biggest modern shonen we have today, alongside titles like My Hero Academia and Demon Slayer. With its rapid high-speed pacing, compelling characters, elaborate plot twists, and creative action set pieces, it's no wonder Black Clover has risen to be one of shonen's bigger and more popular title in this modern era. And while the anime adaptation for the series has seen its fair share of missteps, I still think it's one of the more bankable shonens out there. I mean, it's currently going strong with 3 seasons and 100+ episodes with no signs of stopping for the foreseeable future, so it must be doing something right. Besides, when Black Clover chooses to impress, it impresses. It's just very unfortunate that Studio Boruto is the one handling the series, but I still have so much respect for the people behind the series. They deserve so much praise and credit for just being amazing and dedicated people. But I'm not here to give my opinions on the current state of the Black Clover anime, even though that's literally what I just did. No, I'm here for the openings. And unlike the animation, Black Clover openings are a bit more consistent in that category with a hefty amount of standouts. And I'm here to rank them from best to quote-unquote worst. I would also like to point out that this list is entirely objective. Everything I say is unequivocal, undisputable, unmistakable fact, and there ain't nothing you can do to change that. Okay, everybody clear on that? Alright, let's get started. Before we get started, I would like to first point out that this video contains spoilers up to the latest chapters of the manga. I can't really start ranking these openings without first analyzing them and mentioning a lot of the foreshadowed events within them. So if you're not caught up with Black Clover yet, then whatever, you know the drill. Also, the criteria that I'm using to rank these openings is based on a tried and tested, theoretically proven algorithm designed to analyze every detail within a frame per second ratio to accurately represent the opening in its barest of state. Basically, whether I like the opening or not. I'll be factoring the visual aspect of the opening, aesthetic, symbolism, foreshadowing, etc., as well as the musical aspect, my own subjective opinion of it, the lyrics and how it ties into the opening, but I won't dive too deep into it as I feel I'm not properly qualified to talk about music in a more profound level. I'll leave that for the musical scholars and Rick Astley to unravel. So, I'll be factoring all of those things together to deliver a somewhat objective ranking of all Black Clover's openings, based on my own subjective criteria, of course. Alright, I've rambled long enough. Here is my ranking of all 11 Black Clover openings we have so far, starting with number 11. This opening is probably the most generic Black Clover opening in my opinion. There's not much to say about this opening other than the hype segments look great and the song is fairly catchy. There are a couple of interesting shots like this one right here, where we see Yuno's magic stone as it casts a pretty large shadow, hinting at its importance within the coming arcs. In the improved version of the opening, this scene is expanded upon by having an ominous dark smoke come out of the shadow of the magic stone, which could be foreshadowing the Devil Zagreed and his reveal. Another interesting shot is right at the very beginning of the opening, where we see a Black Clover amongst a field of green clovers, which doesn't really hold that deep of a meaning. It's more of a visually pleasing shot than anything else. If you point a gun to my head and make me find a deeper meaning in this shot, I could see it as a representation of not only Asta but also the Black Poles as a whole and how they are perceived in their society, but I'd say that's a bit of a stretch. The introduction segments for the relevant characters are cool, and as a whole, the opening is solid in and of itself. As an opening that features a tournament arc of Black Clover, I think it does its job fairly well. It's an okay opening for Black Clover. Again, the hype segments look fantastic and the song is inoffensive, but the lack of anything to really discuss with this opening is the reason it's placed last on my rankings. This is Black Clover's latest opening, and it will cover the 6-month time skip that was skipped in the manga. Mostly though, the arc is just a huge training arc, so I can understand the lack of anything to talk about with this opening, because aside from the really gorgeous opening sequence with the lake scenes, frankly there really isn't much to talk about in this opening. And granted, maybe there are things that they're setting up in this opening that will pay off during the arc, but because this is an anime original arc, I can't really point those out. And thus, this is an opening that is really hard to gauge its real value because of the lack of hindsight. From what I can see, there really isn't any scenes or shots that are foreshadowing the latest arc of the manga. Maybe one, which I'm still 50-50 about. It's an opening that doesn't really have much to break down or discuss, or rather an opening I can't break down and discuss because of the lack of information. Maybe Yuno standing on top of a tree branch high above the ground has a deeper meaning other than it looks like a cool shot, but I wouldn't know. What I do know is that it looks like a cool shot of Yuno standing on top of a tree branch high above the ground. I mean, to be fair, the opening is gorgeous. Have I told you guys how beautiful the lake scenes are? Heck, the title card looks so magnificent. The colors used in the shot, beautiful. The focus shifting from Asta to the landscape, gorgeous. The lighting and lens glare present in the scene, magnifique. There's also this shot right here, which is my favorite shot in the opening. We see a map of the world, then the camera rotates and we see this cool effect. Then we see the world map beacon shown by darkness starting from the Spade Kingdom all the way to the Clover Kingdom. This could represent the Dark Triad's invasion of all the kingdoms since the darkness started from the Spade Kingdom after all. Which could also allude to their end goal plan of creating a doorway for the devils to come true to our world and engulf it in darkness. But maybe I'm overthinking it and it's just a cool shot meant to vaguely represent the devils in this arc. This is the 50-50 scene I was talking about earlier, by the way. I'm not sure whether this was intentional or not since that end goal plan I just mentioned was only just revealed in the latest chapter of the manga, so I'm pretty sure the animators that did this opening wouldn't have known about it then, but I don't know, maybe Tabata told them or something. There's also this moment of reintroducing past characters like Keanu and Kahoto and the Witch Queen. Does that mean they'll play a huge part in the arc, or were they just there as a stand-in to keep the runtime going? I don't know. The music is great though. It reminds me a little bit of like classic shonen openings. I don't know why, but it does. It's really cool listening to, and as a follow-up to Black Catcher, I would say it's quite enjoyable even though I will still miss my routine of watching Black Catcher on repeat before watching the actual episode. But I think it's an awesome song, especially after listening to it on repeat while studying the opening. So that's pretty much my thoughts and stories. I really do like the song, and the beginning of the opening with the lake scenes are just spectacular. But the lack of anything to really break down with this opening is the reason why it's so low on my list. But I would say take everything I just said with a grain of salt, because this opening is really hard to rank with the lack of hindsight. This is not a fixed position for this opening, but rather just an initial one. I could be wrong about everything I said, and after this current arc is over, I could be looking back at this opening and seeing everything that I had missed and bashing my head against the wall because of how stupid I was. Heck, this could even be a top 5 opening once all is said and done. I don't know what's gonna happen, though I highly doubt it. But what I do know is that I'm just a weeb making a video about a series I love to an audience of practically zero. But yeah, that's pretty much my take on Black Clover opening 11 stories by Snowman. To be fair, I actually really like the song by Kumikodo. I think it's catchy in its own right. However, for a Black Clover opening, I don't think it fits much with the tone of the show. Guess Who Is Back's slower beat and rhythm, in my opinion, just doesn't mesh well with an action-packed series like Black Clover. A staple of Black Clover openings is a segment I like to refer to as the hype segments. This is the part of the opening where they showcase the upcoming fights or matchups that we, the audience, should get excited about. In opening 6, it's this moment. These are generally the parts of the opening you get to see the animators flex. They really build up to this moment in the opening because this is basically their hook. This is the thing that they bank on to get you invested into the series, or at least get you interested in the show. And usually this occurs for the most part during the climax of the song. The chorus. That's why the general rule of thumb for the chorus is that it needs to be high energy to fit with the visuals and to sell the moments. This isn't exactly new. This is very much true for most animes in existence. The problem that I have with Guess Who Is Back is that the chorus doesn't really increase the tempo or beat of the song too much. Instead, it retains the slower rhythm and vibe of the song, which I cannot stress this enough, works for the song, but with a slower song means the visuals obviously have to match them, and that's what this opening does. That's why the hype segments in this particular opening are mostly still slow-mo type shots, which I think is a unique quality of this opening, but compared to the rest of the openings, I just don't like as much. In general, the opening is just slower compared to other openings. Even OP8 Sky and Blue, while also being a slower song, ramps up during the chorus and adequately sells the hype segments in my opinion. Now in terms of visuals, I think there's a few notable moments of foreshadowing hinted in there. Like for example, after the title card, we get to see the silhouette of the demon in the intro of every Black Clover episode, and the figure of Lich is seen within the silhouette of that demon before ultimately fading out. This is the opening foreshadowing the true identity of the demon, which is revealed to be Lich himself. And when I say Lich, I mean real Lich, not Patri using the name Lich, I mean real OG elf leader Lich. Then there's a patented Black Bull's introduction segment, and I say patented because pretty much all Black Clover openings aside from a few feature a segment like this. Anyways, the segment itself isn't anything special, but it is later copied by opening 9 right now with an added twist to it which I am excited to talk about when I get to it. This opening also has a couple of interesting transitions. I really like Asta's swing during the build up to the chorus. We see Asta swinging his sword downwards, but then it cuts to a shot of Asta having already swung his sword but leaving a slash-like trail in place of it. It just creates this very fluid motion transition from one shot to the next. There's also this scene which I think is the opening's money shot. I love this shot so much because it's such a creative transition how all the Black Bulls kind of come out of each other before facing against Veto. This scene is a cooler and more creative extension of the shot earlier in the opening where we see all the Black Bulls pitted against a massive Veto, signifying the magnitude of his threat and how in order to beat him, everyone has to literally work together. This shot pretty much means the same thing but executed in a much better way. There's a couple more fascinating visuals in the opening, but for the most part they're not really interesting enough to warrant me talking about them in length. So yeah, that's pretty much opening 4 for you. I truly like the song Guess Who Is Back by Kumikoda, but for a Black Clover opening I don't think it fits that well with its slower rhythm. The visuals are good and there are a couple of cool creative transitions and foreshadowing in there, but not nearly enough to be placed higher than 9th place. There are 2 versions of this opening, and to be fair, I will be factoring both of them in my analyzation. A major theme of the opening is about confronting one's past. If you look at the majority of the relevant characters in this opening, they all have stories pertaining to this. From Vanessa and her mother, the Witch Queen, to Finral and his relationship with his brother Langris, to even Fanzel and his connections to both the Diamond Kingdom and Mars and Fauna. I like that within their character introductions in the opening we get some slight hints to this. The patented Black Bull's introduction segment that is shown at the very beginning of the opening is also played around with, where all the relevant Black Bull members that are going to be featured in the arc get solo introductions as opposed to the rest who get partnered up. Another detail I appreciate is that the transition from the title card to the episode name is reminiscent of the Witch Queen's magic. It's a neat little detail that doesn't add much value to the overall quality of the opening, but is still appreciated nonetheless. My biggest concern with the first version of the opening was the hype segments. It was pretty much non-existent. What we got were basically glorified slideshows, which is very much disappointing because the climax of the song is really perfect to sell those hype moments. Granted, I did like this effect they used prominently during the segment, specifically these 2 shots right here. Not only is it an eye-catching visual treat, but I also like the implication of the shot. For Mars, having Fauna framed inside his silhouette shows just how much she means to him, and with Yami having William framed inside his silhouette implies his lingering doubts about trusting William. But that's pretty much the only noteworthy thing about this segment in the first version of the opening. Seriously, the opening is at the climax of the song yet we're still not finished with character introductions. Thankfully, in the second version of the opening this is all fixed. In this version we have proper hype segments that make up for the lack of it in the first version. And that beautiful chorus has now been properly incorporated. The opening becomes so much more exciting and thrilling. Seriously, there's just so much more emotion conveyed in this version than the first. And the animation for it is just stunning. Another thing the second version changes is that we get a better glimpse of Asta's transformation to Black Asta before ultimately ending with the obligatory Black Bulls group shot. Aside from a few frames of the AMD and Black Asta, there really weren't much things to dissect that pertain to the upcoming events in the series, which is a bit of a downside to the opening, but the decision to focus primarily on the events of the arc it featured I think was a wise decision nonetheless. So opening 5 Gamushura by Miyuna featured an awesome song backed up by solid visuals, and though the first version had a few glaring problems, the second version fixes those and cements its place at number 8. I actually personally dig this opening. I don't think it's the most creative opening of Black Clover, nor does it have a ton of foreshadowing placed within it. There are some, but most of them are too vague to actually hold any deeper meaning aside from, oh, what could this thing be? But as an opening, I think it actually holds its fair share of charms. Both versions, the Magic Dungeon Arc version and the Royal Capital Arc version. In the Magic Dungeon Arc, I think the aesthetic choice of having the color palette mainly be red and blue is rather interesting. While the color blue could indicate the trust and bonds formed between the Black Bull members, and the color red could indicate the passion and strength they all have, I do think the decision to use that particular color palette is more of a stylistic choice rather than a deep and meaningful one. There doesn't seem to be a logical reason why a particular character is associated with either the color blue or red. Asta and Noel's work rather well, and you could argue Lux as well, though I do think it doesn't quite fit, but Magna with blue is a bit of a stretch. He is one of the more passionate Black Bulls member. His magic attribute is fire, and he's a bit of a hothead. Having blue associated with him I don't think works that well. However, there is another color that the opening utilizes, which is the color green, a color deeply associated to Yuno, which only shows up when Belle, the Wind Spirit, makes her debut in the opening, highlighting the importance of Yuno throughout the Black Clover series. Oh, and a neat thing to point out is that this is actually the opening that debuts the Black Bull introduction segment, which is adapted by most Black Clover openings moving forwards. The shot of the Magic Knight Captains is fine, though I do think the Royal Capital version does a better job with this. The hype segments are your standard stuff. We get a ton of Mars and his backstory, but I think the most interesting shot in this entire part is this shot right here. We see two sides of Luck's smile, a creepy, maniacal looking one and the other sweet and gentle. This is a fantastic visual to showcase Luck's past and how much it defines who he is. He's obsessed with battling and being the strongest, using his own strength without relying on others, because that's what his mother told him to do before dying from, literally, stress. He sees winning as a form of pleasing his deceased mother, and he values it because it's the only way he can feel connected to her. It is only when Asta rescued him and made him understand that he needs other people that he started to open up, and we see this moment in the opening change in subsequent versions. In the Royal Capital Arc version of the opening, there are some slight changes which in my opinion does improve some aspects of the opening. For example, instead of having individual Black Bull introductions, in this version we only get a group shot of the Black Bull squad to give more screen time to our Black Clover trio, Asta, Noel, and Yuno. In this version as well, the colors are more defined, and I do like the use of lighting and shadows to make it seem more three-dimensional. The Magic Knight Captains also get a group shot, but their characters are a lot more defined and easily distinguishable in this version. For example, we see Rill off to the side looking relaxed and carefree. Figo Leon carries himself like a true and respectable leader, but this is arguably my favorite thing in the entire opening. Galder Poizot, the former captain of the Purple Orcas, is shown to have his back turned away from the other captains while also being cast by darkness, foreshadowing his eventual betrayal to the country. The hype segments in this version doesn't have a shot quite like Luck's smile in the previous one, but I do like this shot right here in particular. Figo Leon is casted in the color red and black, signifying his fate and the tragedy that befalls upon him. I also really like that this is contrasted by Mars' moment in the first version, because the lyric that plays in both shots is this: I'm looking for the reason I'm alive. I'm looking for the reason I'm alive, which just works so well to represent Mars and his inner struggles during this time, and for Figo Leon, which had a looming tragic fate awaiting him. After that, the opening plays out pretty much the same way as the original. Yuno's moment with Belle, Asta swinging his sword, and then both ends with a montage of MacGuffins that have either already been shown or are prevalent in the future arcs to come. Final thoughts on the opening: I like the song. I think it works well as a Black Clover opening. I like how singable it is, how I can just follow along with the song and have fun singing along to it. In terms of visuals, I think there are a couple of standout moments here and there. Both versions I like. Again, not much foreshadowing of upcoming events with this one, but that's fine. And the song and visuals work together in my opinion. Painted Black by Bish, a solid Black Clover opening. I love this opening, truly, and it pains me to place this so low on my rankings. It pains me, but I have to be objective in my rankings, and Black Clover Opening 3 Black Rover by Vicky Blanca isn't perfect. I know. Blasphemy! What is this idiot talking about? He shouldn't even be talking about Black Clover if that's what he thinks. I get it. I'm also as upset as you guys, but it is what it is. The opening starts at arguably one of the most fascinating shots in the entire opening. We see Nero soaring through the beautifully colored skies as she lands on top of the statue of the first Wizard King, who is then on top of the skull of the giant demon he slayed. This could be foreshadowing the relationship that all three of these characters share with one another. Sekre being Lumiere's servant who helped him defeat the demon who, as the series revealed, is actually Lich, Lumiere's best friend and brother-in-law. This is one of those things that I think was done accidentally, considering this opening came out way before these revelations in the manga were ever revealed. But I could be wrong. Either way, props to the people who made this. The opening continues with a play on the usual Black Bulls introduction segment. Instead of a montage of members doing poses or looking cool, we have a shot of the Black Bulls on a typical day. We get to understand who these characters are and the quirks each of them have in the small time we get to spend with them. Vanessa is drunk on the corner, and the lack of interest from her drunkenness by the other members implies that this is normal for her. Gordon walks past the other members while glancing at them from afar because he can't quite communicate with them properly but still thinks highly of them and wishes to be friends with them. Gouch only cares about the picture of his little sister in his hands and doesn't mind anyone else in the room. Luck is being enthusiastically chased down by Magna while Magna, in frustration, tries to hit Luck with his fireball but to no avail. This speaks volumes of their dynamic as characters and how Magna is always the one chasing after his rival, Luck. Asta, Charmy, and Noel are eating on the table. Charmy is having the time of her life while Noel is eating all prim and proper like a royal would. And Asta is eating like your typical shonen protagonist, which is why it was inevitable that he would choke on his food. Noel is the only one who notices and gives him a cup of water. This again speaks volumes of their dynamic as characters. Noel might act sinister on Asta, but deep down she really cares about him and will always be there to help him. Yami is off on his own world just reading the newspaper even though Luck and Magna are causing a commotion and only gets up when he feels irritated and destroys the base in the process, while Finral walks in enthusiastically greeting everybody before having a wall explode in his face. This is hands down my personal favorite Black Bulls introduction segment because of just how well this entire scene plays out. We get so much from just this little interaction they have. With this one scene, we get to know everything about these characters, their quirks, their dynamics, their relationship with one another. It is truly one of the more unique and creative ways to introduce your main cast. I'm actually quite disappointed the series doesn't do this more often. I much prefer this than the generic pose and look cool introduction segments. After that, we get a montage of characters that isn't really worth discussing. The next interesting thing that happens during the chorus, aka the hype segments. We get a nicely animated fight between Asta, Noel, and Luck against Faceless Eye of the Midnight Sun goons. Which honestly, I don't understand this scene at all. I love the animation, yes, it's fluid and eye-catching, but what the hell is this scene supposed to be? This opening debuted during the Eye of the Midnight Sun arc. Luck isn't even a part of that arc, so why does he get front and center during the hype segment of this opening? Why is there no Gouch during this whole thing? This was his arc. Why are they fighting faceless goons instead of maybe Sally? So this is one of the things that became a deciding factor as to why this opening is placed so low on my rankings. And yes, I know the next scene is Yami vs. Patri, and that is an epic moment for sure. But I'm just left scratching my head as to why the chorus of the song, the hype segment, features characters that are not even a part of the arc. It just baffles me. Now to reiterate my claims earlier, I love this opening, but truth be told, there really isn't much to talk about in terms of visuals. Aside from the first scene with Nero, the opening doesn't have any more foreshadowed events. No unique visuals or deep meaningful ones as well. The opening does have the best Black Bull introduction segment, but it also has one of the more confusing hype segments as well, with characters not even featured in the arc. The biggest thing this opening has going for it is that it has a musical god singing the song. Truly, Vicky Blanca creates the best Black Clover opening songs. If not for that, I could see this opening being a 9 or 8. Seriously, in terms of music, Black Clover is second only to Black Catcher. But with great music comes great visuals, and unfortunately, the music was just too much for the visuals to match. Here we are, Black Clover Opening 1 Haruka Mirai by Kangaku Pierrot. Arguably Black Clover's most iconic opening. With what? How many times has this opening been featured in the series' biggest climactic moments? This is the opening that when you hear, you know what's about to go down. This is grade A boss music right here. So many times has this been used. So many epic memories because of the song. Haruka Mirai when used as climax music is incomparable. But if I'm being fair, as an opening, it's probably one of the weakest ones. When you watch the opening, there is no identity to it. Nothing that really stands out, it's an introductory opening. Nothing else. Pretty much the entire thing is just one long introduction. Character after character after character showing up without much substance. Yes, there are a few interesting concepts they implement. Like for example, how Yuno is always framed above Asta no matter what scene it is, to showcase their dynamic as characters. How Asta is always playing catch up to Yuno. There's literally a scene where Yuno is flying above Asta looking down on him. If that's not on the nose, I don't know what is. Then there's the Black Crows at the beginning of the opening, which can allude to Asta being the only person in this world without any magic powers, and thus he is a Black Crow, typically associated with bad luck and misfortune. The hype segments are also pretty much non-existent. There is no big hook that catches viewers' eyes, no money shot of any kind. It's just introduction after introduction after introduction after introduction. The only action-ish segment is shown during the build-up to the chorus, and not even the actual chorus. Then there's this shot right here, which even to this day I find redundant. Noelle is looking up, then looks down as if in defeat, then in the next shot she's looking up again. I don't know if it's just me, but the lack of continuity on that shot bothers me. Every time. Overall, this opening is one of the weaker openings. You know what? It is the weakest opening of Black Clover. Yeah, I'm calling it, because as generic as the Rankagaki page was, at least had proper hype segments in it. As an opening to a tournament arc, it complements it rather nicely. This on the other hand lacks its own identity. This opening should be on the bottom, I agree, but it's not because of its significance in the series. Just on pure association, this opening is one of the most iconic openings of Black Clover, and it achieved that by literally being used during the show's biggest climactic moments. This is an opening saved by its reputation. This opening for a number of reasons. Firstly, I love how clean and consistent it looks. From beginning to end, the art style and animation does not waver. It is one of the most visually pleasing openings of Black Clover. Secondly, the song is really good. Not Vicky Blanca level good, but still really enjoyable. And the lyrics also kind of serve a direct purpose to this opening, which I will discuss more later. Thirdly, there are some really meaningful shots and foreshadowing that are hidden in plain sight in this opening. I love how obvious but at the same time easy to miss these shots are. Fourthly, I love the coming full circle aspect of this opening. Its beginning and ending complements one another perfectly. And last but not least, the opening tells a story. Aside from just promoting the events of the arc, this opening has a true line that it establishes and concludes within the entirety of its runtime. Now to expand on the claims that I just stated. If you think that I'm exaggerating about how gorgeous this opening looks, well, I'm not. Just look at how stunning and beautiful some of these visuals are. The lead up to the chorus is especially insane. And when you get to the actual hype segments, oh, eye candy. They put this going in here front and center and make you anticipate this moment happening, only to not commit to it and ultimately give us episode 99.
Bruh.
Yeah, I'm still as pissed off as I was back then, even though I admit they did a fantastic job in episode 100. But I'm still mad that they couldn't at least give Sis Golin's woman decent treatment. But I digress. I'm here to talk about the opening, and for as disappointed as I was, you gotta admit this just looks amazing. Asta in Universe Glitched was also beautifully animated and really does a great job representing how that moment ultimately ended up in the anime. There are also tons of interesting shots and foreshadowing I just have to talk about in this video. Like for example this shot of Patri walking towards the Clover Kingdom. Patri is shot from an upward angle in which we can see the full scale of the kingdom in contrast to Patri, symbolizing the huge obstacle he has to overcome in order to achieve his goal. Sweet, sweet revenge. Or how about this, where we see a figure of a man holding someone in their arms as they are consumed by flames, which then cuts to a close-up of an eye seeing something happening. And if you're wondering what this scene actually alludes to, do not fear, for I am here. The person holding another person in his arms is Lich, and the person in his arms is Tetia, who had just died. The eye is Lumiere's, and what he's actually seeing is Lich transforming into the giant demon. In other words, this is the moment behind the Black Clover intro, one of the show's biggest mysteries, all spelled out here in plain sight. And to think this opening debuted far before this revelation was ever revealed in the anime. Moments like these are what I appreciate the most with openings. These foreshadowing, spoilery moments that are right right there, but most of the time you just completely miss because of the lack of hindsight. Then there's the story this opening delivers. The beginning of the opening shows us Asta and Yuno as kids. This is meant to give us an idea of the relationship these two characters have. We see them running through the forest with Yuno following behind Asta. This is contrasted with the shot of Yuno now ahead of Asta, but this time Asta hesitates to follow as Yuno walks on ahead. The next time we cut back to this moment, we see Asta desperately trying not to be left behind by Yuno. Then the conclusion to this whole thing. Towards the end of the opening, as the song is ramping down, we cut back to this moment. Asta looks on at Yuno, who is still ahead of him, but this time, he throws away all his hesitation and doubt. He resolves himself that no matter how far ahead Yuno ends up being, he will never give up and will continue to pursue his lifelong rival. I love that the opening was able to tell this little story about Asta and Yuno. It shows us exactly who these people are. Yuno is and will always be inspired by Asta to keep bettering himself, to keep improving, because he believes Asta can and will always keep up. That's how much respect he has for him. That's why we see him in the beginning reminisce about their time together as kids, the exact moment he was inspired by Asta. And Asta is the guy that respects Yuno so much that he sees him always ahead of him. But this doesn't discourage him from always trying to beat Yuno no matter how tough that endeavor might be, because Yuno is his lifelong rival. They both regard each other highly and both have so much respect for one another. And when you look at the lyrics, it kind of seems like it's taken straight from the perspective of Asta himself, though it does allude more to a romantic relationship than a brotherly rivalry. So I don't think it perfectly fits, but I think the core of the song does for the most part. Unless, Asta actually does have some romantic feelings for Yuno, in which case, rip Asta's harm. Rip Noel, rip Mimosa, rip whoever the other girl is, rip them all. And as a final treat, we have the last shot of this opening, which is Asta, beaten up and bruised yet still determined, looks towards the sunset as if to say that no matter what challenges you face, no matter how many obstacles get in your way, as long as you get back up and never give up, a new day will always arrive. I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking it, but I like that message. And I love how the opening comes full circle with it. Opens with a sunrise and ends with a sunset. It's great. Black Clover opening 8 Sky and Blue by Girlfriend is awesome, and that's why it's fourth on my list. First of all, let's get this out of the way, because how can you talk about this opening without first mentioning the legendary music by musical god Vicky Blanco? I love, capital L-O-V-E, love, not only this opening song, but this opening in general. If I were to rank my personal favorite openings of Black Clover based on just my subjective thoughts, if I were just completely subjective, this would probably be my first or second. If I were to rank Black Clover opening songs, shit, Black Catcher is first, no doubt, not even a competition. Followed up by Black Clover easily. Vicky Blanco just makes the best Black Clover music. I know people personally that have not seen any Black Clover at all, yet know this song and absolutely adore Black Catcher. That's how great this song is. Then you may be wondering, why is it only third? Well, I think it speaks more so of the quality of the other two openings than it does for this one. Simply put, this opening is great and has the best opening song in all of Black Clover history. But overall, the other two openings I have yet to rank are just slightly better than this one. But this opening is still really, really good. Case in point, the visuals. Now, there are two versions of this opening, and what I like about it is that it takes some concepts from the first version and expands on it on the second version, like the Sekiro scene at the very beginning of each opening. In the first version, Sekiro is shown floating down a void of darkness. This is meant to represent her life after having been forced to use forbidden magic and transformed into a bird wandering the earth for centuries. It is dark and full of nothingness and is supposed to reflect her loneliness and isolation during this time. Then we cut to a shot of Nero's silhouette as she flies over the events in her life that led to her being who she becomes, which then thematically ends with the introduction of Asta, where the story of Black Clover begins. In the second version, instead of Sekiro floating down a void of darkness, we see her falling down from what seemed to be faded skies, which then slowly turn into vibrant blue skies, representing her new life as a black bull. We also see her wearing a black bull's robe. She is no longer alone and isolated. She's now part of the Black Bulls. a family. Then as contrast to the first version, we see Nero flying over the open sky. This is meant to represent her freedom and her new beginning, that she is no longer shackled by her past and that she can finally be happy and be among people that care about her. With the first version, I do like how they kept things relatively simple. It featured only the essential characters in the arc and had an overarching theme throughout the whole thing, overcoming despair. That is why throughout the entirety of the opening until the final moments, the color palette is entirely black and white. And we also have rain throughout to sell the tone and mood. We also see the theme of the opening beautifully exemplified with the first two characters introduced after the second scene, which is Asta and Patri, two characters that both suffered despair and both overcame them. I like the little detail of Lich's 4-leaf Grimmer turning into a 5-leaf Grimmer before coming into possession of Asta. I think it's a cool touch that they added. I also like Patri's introduction in particular, where we see him running through the rain, desperate and lost, and most likely regrets what he has done, before finding solace in Lich's kind and forgiving arms. It speaks a lot to Patri's character and what he's going through at that moment. With the second version, it doesn't really have an overarching theme throughout like the first version, and it spends more time introducing characters and setting up events in the arc. In terms of hype segments, I think both versions do a good enough job of doing what it's supposed to do. Both versions are flashy and exciting and interesting, and they each have standout shots that can really grab the viewer's attention. For the first version, I like this one in particular. I think it looks cool. The split screen montage of characters just looks cool, and the cuts match the beat of the song perfectly. I also like that it leads directly to a shot of Yuno and Asta's specialty moves that they use in the arc. In the second version, the shots of Noel and the Heart Queen looks awesome and intimidating, and seeing Undine just adds to that. It's fantastic to look at. Then we get to the ending for both versions. I like the first versions more because it's a lot more meaningful and ties the entire opening together so well. But the second version just leaves on such a high note and makes you hyped up and excited for what's to come, especially if you've read the manga like I have. Okay, so with the first version, we see Sekret turn around because of the light that is slowly opening up behind her. Then we cut to a shot of two men, Lumiere and Lich, offering a helping hand towards her as we see colors slowly coming to the shot to signify the end of her lonely suffering. This brings Sekret to tears before cutting to the Black Clover logo. It's a beautiful ending to a really solid opening. With the second version, instead of going for meaningful, the opening ends on impactful. During the final moments of the opening, we see Yuno and Belle, which then cuts directly to a shot of the Dark Triad. And if you don't know who the Dark Triad are, I am warning you now, I will be spoiling it, so if you don't want to be spoiled, then go to the timeskip provided on screen. Okay? Everybody clear on that? Alright. I will now be spoiling who the Dark Triad are. The Dark Triad are a trio of demon-wielding mages who rule over the Spade Kingdom. And in the current arc, they have done things that are just frankly horrific. The one on the right is Dante, who not only demolished and embarrassed post-timeskip Asta, but is also responsible for doing this to Gouch. The one on the left is Vanica, which we still haven't seen her wreak havoc in the manga, but is the host of the Devil Magicula, which is being heavily set up in the current arc. And most notably, the one in the middle is Xenon, the guy that even Luck is afraid of, the guy that killed half the members of the Golden Dawn, captured their leader Vengeance, and left Yuno in a near-death state. This guy is f***ing ridiculous, and I don't think it's an overstatement to say that having him be the ending to this opening is damn f***ing impactful. Okay, so all in all, that's opening 10 Black Catcher for you. Both versions serve the series in different ways, but are both effective in their own ways. Plus, it doesn't hurt that it is accompanied by the definitive best opening song in Black Clover history. With all that, it's no wonder Black Clover opening 10 Black Catcher by Vicky Blanca is third on my list. Okay, truth be told, I didn't really expect this opening to be in this spot at all. I was genuinely surprised at how amazing this opening was when I rewatched it for this video, because I don't really have that fond memories of the opening when it originally aired. To me, it wasn't really that impactful as an opening, but upon doing my research and constant rewatch and breakdown of this opening, I was shocked at just how many things this opening did differently and how bold it was. This is probably Black Clover's most unique and creative opening in my opinion. From the visuals to even the music and lyrics used, holy shit, is this opening great. So let's start at the very beginning, shall we? The opening opens up with the big inciting incident that leads to all of the events that have happened so far in the series, Tetya and Lich's marriage. So right from the get-go, the opening is already flexing its chops by literally opening on probably the most important incident in all of Black Clover, because it is the start of everything in the series. If this event didn't happen, the elves wouldn't have been massacred, Patri wouldn't have been resurrected and manipulated into taking his revenge against the humans, Asta would not have gotten his grimoire because Lich would never have given in to despair, and the legend of the Wizard King would have never been born if Lumiere hadn't given his life to protecting the kingdom from the Lich transformed demon. Need I go on? And from here, it just follows it up. There are some really great shots that are shown in the first 15 seconds of the opening. This shot of Lumiere with Sekiro cleverly hidden behind him, this shot of Lich among a pile of dead elves, and this, probably my favorite shot in this whole thing. Lich stares right at us while holding his deceased wife in his arms, because in this moment, the shot is a direct point of view shot of Lumiere. Meaning, for this moment, we're seeing this event in Lumiere's eyes, taking us directly into this moment as if we, the audience, are actually the ones witnessing it firsthand. It is also important to note that the vibrant colors start fading as we see more and more of the gruesome tragedy that took place during this time, until there is no longer any color aside from the monotonous black and white. And this is just from the first 15 seconds of the opening. We have barely even started. Then we get a twist on the patented Black Bull's character introduction segments we've grown accustomed to for so long. But instead of having the Black Bulls introduced, it is the elves that are introduced first, implying that this is their story and that they are the more important characters in this arc. The style used is also a direct reference to Opening 4 and its Black Bulls introduction segment. This is one of the things that makes this opening unique and creative. It took an element of previous openings and twisted it to give us something new and extraordinary. Then the title card hits and we see Asta and Yuno watching the destruction and chaos that have ensued to the kingdom as it pans upward to imply just how big of a challenge this whole thing will be for our heroes. When we finally get to the patented Black Bulls introduction segment, there is also a twist that makes it different and unique. Instead of seeing them at their best moments, we see them all in this badly beaten up and bruised state. Everybody has gone through shit. Then we get the Charmless introduction, but it's not quite what it seems. We only get to see her shadow, but if you look at it closely, you see it rising and growing, which is foreshadowing a dwarf heritage that will be revealed during the arc. In terms of introductions, this opening has done a fantastic job. It's different and interesting, and overall it's just memorable. Then we get to the chorus. It's reveal after reveal after reveal of hype moments and segments. I love the pacing of this entire thing. How everything just flows together and it fits the beat of the song. The shots don't overstay its welcome. It is all given the appropriate amount of time to shine. From the Welsh fight with Fauna to Fugalian's fight against... Actually, I don't know the name of his opponent. Let me just check. And literally, even in the wiki, he's labeled unnamed. That is hilarious. Sisgolion vs Vetu looks awesome and is an amazing matchup. Yuno's and Mimosa's features in the chorus are actually a bit more subtle. We don't get to see Yuno's opponent, but based on the magic use, it's clear that it's Patri. Mimosa's features sees her healing someone, but we don't get to see who. But after finishing the arc, we see that it was actually Raya, who she was healing, which is significant because of who actually attacked him in the first place. We get to see a little bit of Yami, Jack, and Azel. Then we see the process of Patri giving in to despair. We see the moment Asta saves Patri from despair, and heck, we're getting everything, so why not have William in there as well? We see a 4-leaf clover turn into a 5-leaf one, which is obviously referencing Patrice. In the final moments of the opening, we get a back and forth shot between Yuno's magic stone being placed on the last table and foreshadowing characters and events. From the skull of the giant demon to the statue of the first Wizard King to Nero, and finally Lumiere and Lich together. This foreshadows what of their return, Nero's true form being Sekiro, and Lich being the actual giant demon that Lumiere had to take down in order to save the kingdom. In the final shot of the opening, we see Zagred's wicked smile, the devil that is responsible for the massacre of the elves, and the one who manipulated Patri into taking revenge against the humans. He's the one and only, the figure that connects all of the events of Black Clover so far. The opening ends with the devil who started everything and perfectly complements the beginning of this opening. Opens with the incident and ends with the one responsible for the incident. Man, this opening is good, but that's not all there is to the opening. When you look at the lyrics of the song, it's clear that the opening is all about Patri and his story. With lines like, if they get you, you get them back, and you're being cheered on by an opponent yet unseen, these lyrics are heavily alluding to the fact that someone else is pulling the strings and that Patri is merely a puppet being strung along without much choice. Which is exactly what happens. All of this makes this song the most interesting song, but also the darkest song in Black Clover history. Which is why it is hilarious when you think of the lyrics of the song and the visuals of the opening, especially the chorus, because the lyrics kinda make it seem like it sings about not giving up and surpassing your limits for the heroes, but instead it is actually referring to Patri and the Elsa's hatred for humanity. Opening 9 right now by Empire is such a great opening, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's perfect. There are moments where they could have definitely made something far more interesting than what they did. For example, after the clever and nuanced introduction segments, we get a rehash of what we've seen before in these shots. The build up to the chorus were also not particularly interesting, but at the end of the day, there are still far more great things to this opening than there are not. And with the unique decisions this opening took, it truly leaves its mark as a one-of-a-kind Black Clover opening. This whole opening is a clever and interesting take on Black Clover openings in general. So with all that said, I think I've fairly communicated why this opening is second on my list, and that's because it deserves it. When I was first just conceptualizing this video, this opening was the one I had in mind to take first place. I remember fondly how many details this opening had that I could go through, pinpoint, and notice. And I'm glad that after going through all the other openings of Black Clover, I can proudly say that I was right. This opening is, in my opinion, the best opening of Black Clover, and to understand why, let's break down the opening. The opening starts with the introduction of the most integral characters of the arc, with the Magic Knight Squad symbols being shown in between the introductions in groups of 3. The first we get introduced to is Asta coming out of the shadows and into the light. This could allude to how Asta had to work harder than anyone else to be seen on equal terms with everyone in their society. That even though he is the only person in this world born without magic and should not have achieved anything significant in a world so reliant on magic, he still did and still became one of the most integral characters in the world through sheer dedication and hard work. The symbols of the Coral Peacock, Azure Deer, and Crimson Lion follow up this introduction. Yuno is next seen in the middle of a cloudy field looking serious and melancholic. This establishes the tone of the arc and which direction the series is heading. We see Yuno confidently rise up as if saying he is ready to face whatever comes his way. The symbols of Blue Rose, Silver Eagles, and Black Bulls are shown after this. Yami in his introduction is seen looking out the window, which foreshadows his involvement with Julius's death, being late to save him and not being able to do anything other than to watch the person he looks up to the most die defending the kingdom. This is expanded upon in the second version of the opening when we see just an empty window. The symbols that follow are those of the Purple Orcus, Green Mantis, and Golden Dawn respectively. The last person we get introduced to during the opening sequence is William. He is seen surrounded by tree roots, which represents not only his magic, but also his inner consciousness. We see 2 hands coming out of his face. This is meant to represent Patri and William's shared consciousness over one body. We see the hands slowly take over his face as William calmly lets it happen, foreshadowing the role he plays in their confrontation against Julius. Because William couldn't decide which side to take between the 2 people he valued most, he willingly let Patri take over his body to fight Julius, letting the outcome of the match be his decision. In the second version of the opening, William is no longer there, symbolizing his decision to let Patri take over his body for good after killing Julius. The next scene is Asta and Yuno approaching one another, inside a room that has the symbol of the Clover Kingdom on the floor. This scene is showing us the future of the Clover Kingdom, with the 2 of them playing a significant role in it. This opening sequence not only establishes the most important characters in the arc, but also foreshadows the roles they play within them. The next sequence is the patented Black Bull's introduction segment, with the most interesting shot being Gray and Gordon scream. This foreshadows a powerful moment in their fight against the Eye of the Midnight Sun, Radis and Sally. It's significant because seeing these 2 socially awkward Black Bull members scream their hearts out shows both of their growth and development throughout the series, especially Gray's. Then we get a Black Bulls group shot that shows you who these characters are just by a single glance. What I also really like is that in the second version of the opening, we see Henry a part of this group shot and it's barely noticeable. Just like how Tabata originally made Henry to be in the mangas a phantom, where we see him in some of the panels way before being properly introduced. The next scene is arguably the weakest part of the entire opening. We get introduced to some of the supporting characters in the arc. It's the weakest part of the opening because we basically just get a slideshow moving right to left to reveal them, which isn't really at all interesting. But if the last scene is the weakest part of the opening, the next one is arguably one of the strongest. We see a shot of some of the more recognizable members of Golden Dawn. Among them are Yuno, Mimosa, Klaus, Langris, Hamon, Siren, and William. Then a spotlight shines on Mimosa while the rest of her squad turns black and white as she looks back in confusion, wondering what had happened. This moment foreshadows the elf's reincarnation and the fact that out of all of the Golden Dawn members, she is the only one not transformed into an elf. Because as later revealed, Golden Dawn was formed by William and Patri as a way to get as much humans as possible who have a strong affinity to their elf counterpart into one squad together. In my headcanon, the reason why Mimosa is part of the Golden Dawn in the first place is because she resembles that of Tetya, showing that even though she was human, she still meant a lot to Patri, even if just subconsciously. Next we see Trapcoon, Zora, using his trap magic on himself, which is referencing the moment he and Asta saves Sisgolion during her fight against 5 elves. The next shot is also really interesting. We see both Yami and William in the presence of the Wizard King. This scene is meant to showcase the relationship between all 3 of them, Yami and William being the 2 people who respects Julius the most and in turn who Julius trusts the most, the 2 individuals that plays a major part in his demise. It cuts to a close-up shot of both Yami and William glancing at one another without letting the other know. Notice how Yami glances at William, but when William glances back, he avoids his gaze. This scene shows that they are both wary of one another, which in turn shows the respect each of them have over the other. The fact that they both are aware of one another's presence shows you that they both hold the other in high regard. Then a transition occurs and we see Henry walking down the base's hallway as the walls and rooms assemble, forming the base as he passes by. This is meant to introduce us to Henry and his magic, but also give us a taste of who he is when we see him walking down the base all alone without anyone around. The next scene is arguably my favorite shot of the entire opening. In what seems to be a point of view shot, we see Tetya and Lich sitting on a bench cradling their unborn baby. This is a happy moment emphasized by the use of the color yellow, which is typically associated with happiness and positivity. This happy moment quickly turns into a gruesome tragedy as we see the warm and light color of yellow turn into an intense shade of red and black. As we see the massacre of the elves unfolding, the happy moment replaced by a gruesome tragedy in the blink of an eye. This is meant to show us how unfair and unjust this tragedy was for the elves, how quickly it all went to shit. It's meant to bring us directly into the massacre to see the events from their eyes, from their direct point of view, and give us a sense of the pain and agony they carry with them. The next shot is that of Ryan crying. This could indicate his guilt over what he had done. Knowing Lumiere didn't actually betray them, yet he still went along with Patri's quest for vengeance because he just wanted to see his brethren one more time, even at the cost of hurting innocent people. Now from this point on, the opening completely diverges, and to cover both of them, I will be talking about them separately, starting with the first version. The chorus opens with Asta and Yuno, our 2 leads, showcasing the power each of them have obtained throughout the series. Asta dishing out his ultimate form, Black Asta, and Yuno going full spirit dive. We get a sense of equality between them, that even though they each took different paths to obtain these powers, they both ultimately still arrived at the same destination and will use these powers to protect what they care for the most, the Clover Kingdom and its people. The next scene we see is the formation of the Royal Knights. We see them all converging at one place with Sisgolion at the helm leading them, and with the song nearing its conclusion, we get a final montage. We get a ton of information and foreshadowing in these last few segments. We see Julius's Grimoire, William's mask, Yuno's Magic Stone, which is the vehicle in which the show's biggest plot twist is revealed, Patri and Lich's Grimoire side by side, an image of the real Lich crosses off into Patri's Lich persona, then the Sephira table, the device Patri uses to resurrect the elves, Yami and his reaction towards Julius's death, Julius's unyielding days, and finally the reincarnation of the elves. And while all of this is happening, Julius' silhouette is seen over all the sequence. This version of the opening is solid, and I did love piecing together all the information given during the montage, but I do think it can do better, and better it did. The second version of the opening. In the second version of the opening, the chorus opens with the shot of Patri and Julius amidst a beautiful sunset. They confront one another and stand on opposite ends of the frame, meant to symbolize their opposing beliefs and philosophy. The sunset behind them is meant to mark the end of their understanding, as if to say that this is it. There are no more compromises, no more room to settle this any other way than through conflict. We see Julius confidently stand his ground while Patri advances on forward, leaving everything behind. It cuts to William and we see him struggle with his decision before ultimately accepting what's about to happen through a single droplet of tear. He can no longer do anything but watch as the 2 people he values most in this world tear each other apart. Then the shot of Yami's reaction, which in the first opening was placed among the final montage, is expanded upon in this version, and we see it directly before the fight against Patri and Julius start. And the final battle between Patri and Julius, well, start. The fight is stunningly animated and offers exciting visuals before the final montage hits, which offers less spoilers, but does expand upon the first versions. In the final moments, we get shots of both Patri and Julius's eyes. This is meant to not only foreshadow Patrice's eventual succumbing to despair and becoming a dark elf, but also as a way to inform us what their conflicting philosophies ultimately ended up resulting. Patri turning into a dark elf shows us him losing his philosophy and losing what he ultimately fought for this entire time. This is the result of learning the truth about what truly happened to the elves and learning who the real person responsible for all of their suffering. In the case of Julius, despite knowing his eventual fate, we see Julius's eyes as he opens them. There is not a shred of doubt that can be seen in them. His convictions and beliefs never wavered no matter how dire the situation was. There is nothing Patri could have done in the face of Julius's unyielding determination to serve and protect his kingdom. And the opening ends the same way the first version does, with the reincarnation of the elves. This opening is the best in my opinion because of just how much detail and information it conveyed about the series and its characters. Almost all of the shots shown have a purpose for being there. Some of them even have deeper meanings that tie into the larger themes of the series. Some foreshadow events to come and some are reflections of the characters they portray. I like that this opening has two versions that complement each other and not just slightly alter the visuals and change some scenes. I like that the second version expands on the concepts of the first version and adds nuance to it and pays off some of the setups hidden within them. I love listening to the song and seeing how the edits match the beat of the song. I love breaking down this opening and seeing new information that I had missed or things I didn't realize meant anything more than its surface value. This opening is a treat to watch, a blast to listen to, and a pleasure to talk about. So that was my list. I love Black Clover, and even though the series frustrates me to my living core whenever they don't deliver on the quality they should be able to deliver, I still respect the series and still respect the people that work tirelessly to give us Black Clover week after week after week. It's just a shame that Studio Boruto doesn't give the series as much love and attention as, well, Boruto. But it is what it is, and we can't really change that. I did this video because I love Black Clover and I love watching its openings. I think objectively there really isn't an opening of Black Clover you can consider truly bad. And for me personally, there hasn't really been an opening that I couldn't watch, or dare I say skipped, because I couldn't stand watching it. This is my ranking of Black Clover openings from best to quote-unquote worst. And I would like to see what you guys think of my list. This was Aeronautics, blasting off. Peace.